start out by how's Washington going? You know, you're in the saddle now, you're doing the whole congressman thing. How's it been going?
Oh, it's been real quiet up there. Not much going on. No, it's the first 30 days were disappointing. I mean, it really was. There was a lot of stuff going on, none of which was productive, I will tell you. And then to see the transformation of our capital city to turn into what looks like a third world nation, it is really disappointing. I attended the inauguration. I believe in our institutions. I believe that they are solid and that we must support them. But to go through a 10-foot fence with razor wire on top of it to attend the inauguration, it's disturbing. And when you walk around the streets, it's quiet and everybody's civil. And then all of a sudden you get to the within 2 blocks of the Capitol or our office buildings, and to have armed National Guard troops and razor wire around, it's very troubling, and it's not necessary. So I don't understand the message they're trying to send.
You are entering like a Democratic-heavy House, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But how has that been? I mean, do you feel like there are going to be places where you can work together, you can work with both sides of the aisle?
Yeah. So I finally received my committee assignments last week, and I'm going to be serving on Natural Resources and Veterans Affairs. The Veterans Affairs Committee, I do believe, is the place that we're going to be able to find some common ground. I really do, because that is one place that it seems like everyone recognizes that we've got major issues and that we have an opportunity to make some improvements. I'm going to be the ranking member on the Technology Modernization Committee. So that puts me in a position to really help try and move the subject matter a bit. The biggest thing that I see is that we've got billions of dollars that have been spent on establishing or creating these records or information bases, and the Department of Defense has theirs and Veterans Affairs have theirs, but they're not communicating with each other. And in order for our veterans to really receive the benefits that they've earned and that they certainly deserve, we have to have a smooth flow of information from the Department of Defense information, because that's what establishes what benefits they're supposed to get. And so after working in the auditor's office here in the state of Montana and working so much with insurance and technology and cybersecurity, I was able to establish some relationships outside of the government to really help this. So I'm hoping that we can lean on those folks a bit to help give me some perspective on how things are going on in the private sector and make that transition of information a lot smoother and easier for our veterans.
You're going to bring a lot of expertise to that role.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they also had me on the health committee. So again, when I start looking back at what we did with primary care and reducing prescription drug costs and things like that here at the state level, I'm hoping that I can take some of those concepts and bring them forward as well.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's jump back into Keystone for a minute.
Oh, yes.
You know, this, as you were just saying, this is a huge detriment to the Montana economy. Is there room here to still see this thing go forward? I mean, it cannot be dead in the water. What do you think about that?
It is very, very disappointing. There are people, I've spent the last 3 days now traveling the eastern part of the state, and we've been going into all kinds of operations, meat packers and hemp farms and a lot of things. But each community that we have stopped in along the trail has a problem with the loss of the Keystone. When you start talking about counties that have populations of 1,500 to 3,000 people, and they're going to have a loss of revenue of $2.5 to $5 million a year, that is an enormous hit. That would do so much for their schools, for their hospitals, for their roads, and they're really, really concerned about it. And we've already lost like 200 jobs immediately, and those jobs were really helping the local communities at a time when they needed it the most. I mean, they have suffered through this 12 months of shutdown, if you will, from COVID, and so to have that extra revenue coming in was a big boost to them. We were down in Baker yesterday, and there's a $500 million pumping facility there that was 93% complete, that there was probably 12 people there on the site, and they were basically buttoning up the whole project there, making sure that it was environmentally sound and stable, and the ground was in good shape, that they could winterize it, they're hopeful that we can get something done. What I'm looking at is, can we do something through a state compact process, whether we can do something through contract law. I'm looking at absolutely every opportunity that I can to try and make sure that we can get this permit back in place to get this construction going. Senator Steve Daines has been working with me hand in hand to try and do that as well. Unfortunately, we aren't getting support from Senator Tester. He has taken the political road and just said that he's not going to support this Keystone XL pipeline. And it is, Andrea, it's just a political decision that unfortunately the Democrats have made, because those products are going to be produced and they're going to be refined and they're going to be utilized. And so not to transfer them through the most efficient and safe method is just wrong. It would have increased the value to our oil that's produced here in the state and over in the Bakken region by about $3 a barrel, helping the freight costs. Anybody who's in business in the state of Montana knows that freight is our big thing, coming in or leaving the state. And so with a 250,000 barrel on-ramp in Baker and the ability to mix our higher grade, lighter crude with some of the stuff that was coming out of Canada, the effects of all of that would have really been big.
I know that there's been a lot of push with the Biden administration. Do you see it going anywhere? I mean, he's even had his own administration say, hey, let's take a look at this and let's just rethink this. So do you think that you can get enough of a support system, I mean, Montana leaders even, that maybe there could be some wiggle room there? Do you see it happening?
Well, I'm going to investigate absolutely every alternative possible and things that other folks haven't even thought of. You know, if there's a wall in the way, then by golly, you either have to climb over it or dig underneath of it. But we are going to get around this wall.
Okay. Do you think he understands? You know, do you think that the Biden administration really understands the detriment, the economic detriment that it has to Montana, states like Montana?
I think it's just strictly a political decision that the people that are supporting that administration have made it clear that they are completely against the utilization of fossil fuels, and so they are doing everything they can to shut it down. And we've seen the downside of that. The Keystone XL has nothing to do with the blackouts that we experienced this week, but let's make it really clear. There's a power grid from Canada all the way down to the Texas border. And I met with the general manager of the Macon Electric Co-op, just happened to be in his area, in Circle, the day that we had the blackout. And we had a really good description of what caused that. And you have so much of the power grid that was reliant upon the wind energy that is not reliable when you start getting those frigid temperatures or ice on the turbines themselves, that they lost a lot of energy. And had they not started turning blackouts, rolling blackouts across Montana and North Dakota, the whole power grid would have collapsed and we would have had blackouts and problems for probably about a 30-day period. It would have been tragic, more so than it was. And this is because we have to maintain a base load of energy supply that is produced from fossil fuels.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Let's talk about COVID relief here. How are you feeling about this bill right now?
The COVID relief bill, unfortunately, like many things that we've seen go through Washington, is riddled with a bunch of other expenditures that have absolutely nothing to do with COVID. We still have available to us through the federal government, and when I say us, I mean the nation, about $900 billion, almost $1 trillion that hasn't been sent out yet. And so without even sending that money out yet and packing a bunch of other things into this bill, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We've got a breakdown. I'd be glad to provide it to you about where those funds are available. But it's $250 billion here and $100 billion there for all different types of purposes. My thing is, we need to focus on getting that money to the businesses and that have been shut down and forced to eliminate their revenue. We need to focus our attention on making sure that we have more vaccinations delivered out to the states. But we also need to make sure that we continue to work on the different treatments so that people that do turn up as testing positive for COVID, instead of being hospitalized, let's get to them sooner and utilize some of these treatments that have demonstrated that they can help get folks healthy again.
You know, one of the big things about any sort of stimulus is just how the average Montanan, the average American is going to get that benefit. There's been a lot of talk about the price of a stimulus fund or the price of a stimulus check. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, are you in favor of giving the average Montanan or American that $2,000, $1,400, $700, whatever it is?
See, this is the problem with a huge centralized government where a decision comes down from Washington, D.C., and they have to treat everyone the same. And every single community is different across this nation. And so we have to focus our attention on who were the people that were hurt, who were damaged by the government forced shutdown of their businesses. And then let's make sure that we can get aid, relief into these folks and figure out how to distribute it best. That's why we always see that anything that's handled by the counties and the states ends up being much more effective and actually a lot less expensive than anything that comes out of Washington, D.C. And so my effort, my focus is always, what can we do? How can I be the guy to make sure that we get the control of whatever's taking place back down at the local level?
So, but to answer my question, yes, you are in favor of giving the average Montanan that stimulus check, or do you think that it's best served going to some other sort of a program?
I think that we have to figure out who has actually suffered because of a job being shut down and make sure that they are made whole, is what I think. Okay, and there's a lot of people that not necessarily are going to be under those same circumstances. So let's not just take a big paintbrush and say everybody is going to be treated the exact same, because everybody didn't suffer the same problems.
Okay, sounds good. Let's talk a little bit about Liz Cheney. Wow. The whole situation there. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, you obviously, we know, are a Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. You align with him and believe in what he has put out there. Do you look at what she's done as kind of a black mark on the party, or, you know, how do you foresee?
So here's how I look at that. Liz put a statement out that said she was voting her conscience. And I will tell you that I support anyone voting their conscience. I really, really do. And we had 197 House members, Republican House members, that voted against the impeachment, which was not, there was no hearing, there was no due process, there was no hearing, there was no due process. They brought a resolution to the floor, and there was a bunch of grandstanding. It was theater. And Liz Cheney was Act One. That's what this boils down to. And if she had just come down and placed her vote per conscience, then nobody would have said a single thing. But Liz Cheney is the third highest ranking Republican in Washington, D.C. And she put out a statement the day before that she cast that vote. And she put that statement out as the conference chair. And as the conference chair, the following day, the Democratic Party was able to use that statement condemning the president against the president all day long and against every Republican that was in the House chambers. That is why I asked for Liz Cheney to step down from being the leader of the conference, because she demonstrated that she did not consult with leadership. She did not consult with the rest of the conference. She violated completely the intent of the rules for the conference, and she played a role of weakening the Republican Party at a time where we really needed leadership and we needed folks to come together. And that's why I asked for her to step down. And there was an awful lot of people that certainly agreed with that.
Have you had any conversations with her? I mean, I think, you know, anybody in those surrounding states, you know, you try probably to work really well with, you know, other. Have you reached out? Have you talked to her?
We haven't chatted since then, but we just have received our committee assignments, and look, and I am sure that I will see Liz, and how much we're going to end up working together, you know, that I don't know. But I can tell you, anyone who has spent any time with me in the legislature, in the auditor's office, they will tell you that yesterday's news was yesterday's news, and what I focus on every day is what do we need to do today, and who can help me accomplish that today. And if we have an issue that comes up that she and I are going to, it's going to be beneficial for the country, for our respective states to work together, I absolutely can and sit down and work with her.
Oh, so that, see, okay, so then it's kind of, you can say, hey, I disagree with this, but it's water under the bridge now, let's move.
Everything that I focus on is always policy-based. It is never about personalities. Whenever I cast a vote, up, down, it is always about a policy. It has nothing to do with personalities. And if more folks served their state and their country that way, it would be much more productive.
All right, that sounds good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Interior Secretary nomination. You know, you have said that this person poses a threat to natural resources, and I know that that's important to you.
Yeah.
Is this another policy situation, not a personality situation?
It is 100% a policy situation. And when we have someone who's going to have a lot of direct impact or control over the development of our natural resources, who has demonstrated that they support the new Green Deal and the not developing those resources, that is a major problem. And again, when we start looking at having blackouts just this week, I think that it should make even more people aware. That is not who needs to be in charge of all those resources. When I served on the land board, there's 5.2 million acres of school trust lands that we were responsible for managing. And we were able to develop the resources, whether that was through harvesting timber, mineral easements or leases, pipeline easements, and we were able to utilize all those and also expand access to public lands and protect environmentally sensitive areas. And I think that that is the kind of approach that we need to take, certainly with all of our national public lands. Let's protect those areas that are environmentally sensitive. Let's make sure we provide access to as much of the land as we possibly can, but let's also utilize the resources that are there. That we're charged to do that, to manage them properly. And I don't think using resources and protecting environmentally sensitive areas are mutually exclusive. I really do believe that you can do this both, and I do not believe that she will do that.
Do you see any benefits in her? I mean, she's coming from a state that, you know, aligns in some ways with a state like Montana. You know, we have national parks, we've got Native American communities here. Is there anything that you see with her that might be a positive?
I don't. I don't think that you can take the approach that we're going to tie up the resources that you are charged with managing and then hold yourself out to be a good manager. That's like being a property manager for a shopping mall and saying, but I'm going to keep 50% of the building empty.
Okay, sounds good. You know, let's look back a little bit at the election for a moment here. You firmly believe that the results that happened in some of those states, Arizona, Pennsylvania, that those, is that fair to say that those elections were rigged?
No.
Okay. What are your thoughts on?
So here, when we were sent to Washington to accept the results of the electors, okay. Number one, people need to understand it's not just a ceremonial process. That we were not sent there just to accept those results and say, thank you very much. The Electoral Act of 1887 stipulates very clearly that we are there to evaluate, to make judgment whether we're going to accept those. If we don't, if there's a member from the House and a member from the Senate that objects to those results for any particular state, then we go back and we debate. So this whole process is laid out. So clearly, it's not just ceremonial. We are there to evaluate and to accept or reject those electors. And when this information is brought forward, that several states had numerous allegations of irregularities and fraud, not all states, but several states had numerous credible allegations of irregularities and fraud. If they are willing to elect their state officials by that process, that's one thing. I do not think the federal government should be controlling the elections, okay? But when they send information forward for us to review, to acknowledge the validity of that election to select the president, now that is my job. And so what folks need to understand is it was never about the electors and the acceptance or the objection of the electors was never about President Trump. To me, it was never about President Trump. It was never about a campaign or a candidate. What it was about is election integrity. And when you have thousands, not a handful, thousands of sworn affidavits, you have evidence that was never allowed to be produced in courtrooms. So I have to take the information from the different testimony that was presented to us on the House floor. That is why on several of the states, I rejected those electors.
You do not think they were rigged? You think it was just irregularities, fraud?
I think that there's numerous credible allegations and sworn affidavits of fraud and irregularities. And so for those states to submit their results to me to sign off on those electors, I was not comfortable doing that.
Do you still feel that way? I mean,
Well, I think what I did was absolutely 100% correct. And what I'm hoping is that those states that have those issues, whether it was because of allowing dates to be ignored for registration, whether it was for accepting ballots that did not have signatures on them through the mail, whatever the case was, I'm hoping that those states now and their legislatures will go and sort some of those things out so that they don't have these problems going forward.
We always hear this in kind of the public, as nothing ever actually went to the court. Everything got thrown out at the court level. So, for a lot of people, they're saying, well, then there's nothing really that credible. That's not.
No, that is not the case. So what happened is those cases were not allowed, the evidence for those cases was not allowed to be heard in the courts. That's what the problem was. So the vast majority of the general public did not hear the information about the irregularities and the fraud and the changes that were made through the election process as people, right while they were voting.
That's interesting. So you heard some things. You probably heard some things that the rest of us didn't hear.
Well, a lot of that information is being put out there, but it ends up being background noise.
Was there anything that really stuck out to you in that process that really made you be like, this is not okay?
Well, all of the above. All of the above. I mean, when you have thousands of people, again, we're not talking about just a couple of people or 12 people that were disgruntled because an election didn't turn out the way they wanted to. We had thousands of sworn affidavits that said, I witnessed irregularities, I witnessed fraud. And so you cannot ignore that. You just cannot ignore that. And again, so what I'm hoping is that these states that had all of these problems will take this as a loud and clear message that they really need to clean their election process up.
Okay, that sounds good. That's interesting to hear that.
Only got about 3 more minutes. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, well that sounds good. I think we'll just end on your priorities when it comes to your term.
Okay, so I did not want to take the shotgun effect, okay, when you go into an office because there's always important issues. Golly day, you can walk up the hall and there's an important issue every single day, but if you try to take everything on, you really aren't going to be effective. So when we stepped in, before I even knew what committees I was going to be working on, obviously I wanted to focus on my healthcare issues and this major immigration issue. The immigration issue and that southern border and the security of our southern border, and now we're seeing on the northern border as well, that is big. And we could talk, we'll do another episode, okay, Andrea? Because we've got a lot of things going on there that the public needs to be made aware of, and it's more than just illegal immigrants crossing the border. Major security issues.
Let me ask you really fast, do you plan on heading to the southern border?
I spent some time at the Arizona-Mexico border already.
That's right.
Yeah. So, immigration and healthcare issues. Healthcare is going to be an issue for the next forever probably. I mean, it's decade after decade. We have to make sure that we're delivering that high quality healthcare for affordable costs. And I've really spent a lot of time, as you know, the last several years focusing on that. So I'm going to maintain that. And then now that I have my committees, it's like, okay, we're going to be able to focus on the veterans issues and we're going to be able to focus on natural resources. Both of those fall in my wheelhouse really well, so I'm excited about that. So that's going to be my 4 areas that I have directed the staff to really concentrate our efforts on.
And you really do think you can get some stuff done in a Democratic-controlled house?
I always get things done.
Is there anything else that you want to say?
It is just an absolute honor to represent the people across this state. I mean, we get one representative, and when I walk into a committee meeting or a caucus meeting, they know. Montana, the guy from Montana, he represents 144,000 square miles and about 1 million people, and they also know that I keep in touch with all of them, and it is an honor to represent the people across this state.